Welcome everyone to Fruits of the Orchard. Today is Birchat Naso, the second parsha in the book of Numbers, the book of Bamidbar. And we have three different Torahs tonight, three different insights. For those who are following, we begin on page 369 for those who have Fruits of the Orchard. And the first one is called A Dwelling Place for God. So before we get into it, I want to just mention a very interesting numerical idea about the parsha. This is the longest parsha in the Torah. It's 176 verses, and it's the longest in the whole Torah. But what's interesting that the longest psalm, the 119th Psalm, is also 176 verses. And the longest Talmudic tractate is Bavla Batra, which is also 176 pages. So obviously there's something about this number. And the secret of it is in the Psalm, the 119th Psalm. It is arranged by the 22 Hebrew letters. Each letter begins 8 verses. So there'll be 8 verses that begin with the letter Aleph, and then 8 verses with the Bet. So 22 times 8 equals 176. So it's just an interesting point. And so why is this parsha so long? And this is the idea we're going to get to. At the, like many parshas, there are a number of different matters that are being discussed in the Torah. The last one is the gifts that the princes of the tribes brought at the dedication of the tabernacle, the Mishkan. Now, a question is asked because this parsha is out of chronological order. The Mishkan, the tabernacle, was dedicated towards the beginning of the book of Vayikra, of Leviticus. So everyone is asking, why are the gifts of the princes here in this parsha, in the book of Bamidbar? This is a concept that is called Ein Mukdam V'Muchar B'Torah. There's no beginning or later in the Torah. Now, what this means is there actually is a chronological flow to the Torah, but there are certain places in the Torah where it's obvious that it's out of chronological order. So then the question becomes, well, why is that? All the sages agree that there is this concept called Ein Mukdam V'Muchar B'Torah. There are questions, though. There's sometimes where the sages will disagree whether a certain part of a Torah portion is in actuality out of chronological order or not. There are other ones that everyone agrees with. And this week's Torah portion, everyone agrees that it's very obvious that the dedication of the Mishkan happened in the book of Vayikra. And here it is at the end of this parsha. So what we want to do tonight is try to understand that. So another phenomenon about this parsha, we're told there are certain portions that will always be read before a certain holiday. And one of them is, last week, we read Bamidbar, the first parsha of the book of Numbers, of Bamidbar. And that parsha is always arranged that it will come the week before Shavuos. Now that means that this parsha, Naso, will always come right after Shavuos. as it does this year. This year, Shavuos is Thursday night and Friday. And then we go right into Shabbat, and it's Birchat Naso. So the answer, or one of the answers, as to why is this Parsha out of chronological order has to do with the giving of the Torah at Sinai. So one way we can understand this is, and here I'm going to go back to something that we've learned, is we're told in the Sfirot, each of the Sfirot has an inner dimension. This is especially taught in Chassidut, and Rabbi Ginsburg has made a big thing of this, of understanding the inner motivational, psychological dimension of the Sfirot. So in the Zohar says that the Sfira of Keter has 3 heads, meaning there's 3 different levels within Keter. And Rav Ginsburg teaches that these 3 levels, based on Kabbalah and Chassidut, these 3 levels are called Emunah, Ta'anug, and Ratzon. Faith, pleasure, and will. These are the 3 inner dimensions of Keter, the highest of the Sfirot. Faith, pleasure, and will. So we can understand the flow of the chronological history as played out in the Torah, that when we got to the Red Sea, and it looked like the end, it looked really bad. We were trapped by the sea. The army of Pharaoh is coming. The people did not know what to do. And God performed a miracle and split the sea. We went through, the Egyptians followed, the sea closed on them. And when Israel saw what happened in this tremendous miracle, so the Torah says that we sang a song. This is called the Song of the Sea. It's one of the 10 archetypal songs sung throughout creation. But in the Torah, right before the song, it says, Vayaminu b'Hashem u'b'Moshe avdo. The people believed in God and in Moshe, his servant. And then it says that they sang this song. So the Exodus from Egypt culminates in this expression of faith. Here they had great faith to leave Egypt, to go into the desert with very few supplies, in total faith. The whole Exodus from Egypt was an expression of the people's faith, and it culminated at the Red Sea, where it says, "V'yaminu b'Hashem u'b'Moshe avdo," and they believed in Hashem and Moshe, God's servant. And so the highest level of Keter is faith. What happens after that in Keter is Tanug. And in one of the Psalms of David, it says, Lule Toratcha sha'ashu'ai az avadati be'onyi. If it wasn't for the Torah that gives me divine pleasure, I would be lost in this world. Lule Toratcha sha'ashu'ai. If the Torah wasn't for me the source of incredible pleasure, I would be lost in this world. I'd feel lost. I'd have no connection to godliness and holiness. It's through the Torah that we are able to reach these spiritual levels. So the Torah is connected with this level of divine pleasure. And when we come out of Egypt, so here we are, we're getting towards the end of Sfirat Omer. So then we receive the Torah at Sinai, this coming Thursday evening, the holiday of Shavuot. And receiving the Torah is being able to reach this level of Keter and access this type of divine pleasure. And what happens after receiving the Torah? So the next major theme in the Torah is the building of the Mishkan, the building of the tabernacle. And so all of this was coming to explain why at the end of this parsha are the gifts of the princes that they brought on the dedication of the tabernacle out of chronological order. But now we can understand because it always comes the week after Shavuos. And the major idea that we learn from the tabernacle is a concept called Dira B'Tachtonim, that God had a desire to have a dwelling place in the lower worlds. That the Holy One, blessed be He, had a passion, a desire to have for Himself a dwelling place in the lower worlds. So here, the week after Shavuot, that's when we go back to the dedication of the temple to tell us that coming out of Egypt was only the first step. The second step was to receive the Torah. And the third step was to build the Mishkan. And so building the Mishkan is that third head of Keter, Ratzon, because it's God's Ratzon to have a dwelling place in the lower worlds. And that's what the tabernacle represents. Ultimately, the idea is that God will have a dwelling place in each and every person. Every person will become a living, walking tabernacle that will house God's presence in this world. That's the ultimate goal. As it says in the Torah, Asuli Mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. God says to the Jewish people, make for me a holy place, and I will dwell in them. So the very famous comment is, it doesn't say, I will dwell in it, meaning the Mishkan. The ultimate purpose is, I will dwell in them. Asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. Make for me a holy place, and I will dwell in their midst. So here, we have a beautiful connection to the three inner dimensions of Keter. That faith that we showed by coming out of Egypt, which led us to receive the Torah at Sinai, which is the ultimate of divine pleasure. And then to build a dwelling place for God below. That's God's ratzon, God's will. So these are the three heads of Keter: faith, pleasure, and will. And this follows the chronological flow of the Torah. But here, because this Shabbos will always come right after Shavuos, so this is one way to understand why the gifts of the princes that were given at the dedication of the temple appears in this parsha. So that's our first insight for the evening. The second Torah is on page 370, and this is called the Nazarite vow. As I said in the beginning, like many Torah portions, this portion has many, many different matters are discussed. One of them is called the vow that a Nazir, a Nazarite would make where they would swear off of any product from the vine, any grape product. The main one, as we'll see, is wine, but it includes grape juice also. But the main thing is to swear off of wine. A Nazir would not cut their hair for the full term of their oath, and they would be very careful not to become impure. These were the three requirements of the Nazarite vow. So the question is, why would someone take this vow? Because the Torah doesn't explain exactly who is this meant for. So it's understood that someone who takes a Nazarite vow is because they're having a problem with controlling their desires and their passions. And this is symbolic of drinking wine. In those days, and we know from the prophets, where the prophets would rail against drunkenness and overindulgence in wine. It comes up over and over again in the words of the prophets. Today, so along with a major problem in many, many, many countries is alcoholism, is an addiction to alcohol. But today we have such a wide range of drugs, including drugs over the counter, that many people lose control and become addicted to different drugs or alcohol or other things, gambling, eating, sex, extreme sports, all kinds of things that people become addicted to and lose control over a certain aspect of their lives and can lead to total ruin. So the Nazarite vow is symbolic of a means through which someone could get control of their lives. And here again, the symbol is wine. Even though it doesn't say only wine, it's any product from the vine, including grape juice. But it's really directed towards wine. And I'm mentioning this because for me, it's so really painful what's happening in America now, and not just America, but there is mass addiction to opioid drugs. Many people who start over the counter, they have pain, real pain, and they get a prescription to opiates, and the more they take, it works. It takes away the pain, but then you need more and more. And at a certain point, people can't get enough prescriptions, and they go to the street, and there is fentanyl everywhere in America now, and it is a modern plague. I've been following this for a year or two. It's up to, in 2022, these numbers seem like they can't possibly be correct, but they're absolutely correct. 100,000 people died of ODs of fentanyl in 2022 in America alone. This is outrageous what's going on. It's outrageous. I'm only bringing this up because it's really connected to this idea. Why would someone need a Nazarite vow? Just like you have Alcoholics Anonymous, you have all these 12-step programs to help people break their addictions. Well, here's the source in the Torah for what could be done. This is one of many strategies that could be used, but this is a archetypal strategy where a person has to take a vow and has to refrain from certain things in order to get a handle on their life. So this brings us to trying to understand the Yetzer Hara. What happens to people to get all of these addictions? Well, at some point, we'll call it the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. And that is a broad term for lots of things. But in the sense that we're talking now, it just means where a person loses control over their lives, their desires and their passions and their physical urges overtake them, and they're addicted. And addiction means that a person does not have control anymore. So one of the statements in the Talmud, God says, I created the evil inclination and I created the Torah as its antidote. So it's a very, very important statement. So you would say, well, if God created the antidote, why create the problem in the first place? In other words, what do we need a Yetzer Hara for? So the classic answer that is given is that in order for there to be free will, there has to be an equal and opposite force operating. This is symbolic of the Eitz Hadat Tov Ra, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. For there to be true free will, there has to be choices that can be made. And if there was no evil inclination and we all followed God's will, so in a certain way we would be programmed, I'll use the word, to be marionettes in a way. Without free will, we lack a certain level of what's called being in the image of God. And so free will is the greatest gift that God gives us, and it's also the greatest challenge and trial. We all know that. Another statement in the Talmud is, if God would not help a person, there's no way that they could overcome their evil inclination. That's how strong the evil inclination is. On the other hand, we're told that God does not give us a test that we can't in potential pass. That God will not set it up in a way that we have to fail. We might fail, but we'll fail because we made the choices and we're then going to feel the consequences or the effects. So here we have in different commentaries, and the Talmud itself says the angel of death, the Satan, the snake in the Garden of Eden, and the evil inclination, it's all different names for the same energy. But the way we're explaining it is, this is God's will. This is what God wants for human beings, to be able to have free will. And therefore, there has to be tests. There has to be the possibility of choosing evil. So therefore, if we choose good, then we earn it, we merit it. And this is just one of the classic understandings of life. So one of the main sources for this whole idea is in the story of Cain and Abel. When Cain actually has the idea of bringing an offering to God. A beautiful idea. And so both he and his brother, Cain and Hevel, brought an offering. And we're told that God chose the offering of Hevel, of Abel. And we're told is because Hevel brought the best. And Cain, even though it was his idea, but he cut corners. It was like, okay, I'll bring an offering, but I'll save a couple of pennies here and there, and I'll just bring from the leftovers. So after God chose Abel's, so it says that Cain was very dejected and depressed. So if anyone wants to follow on page 371, or if you have a book of Birchat in front of you, it's chapter 4, verses 6 and 7. So God says to Cain, well, first it says, and Cain was very angry, and his face fell, meaning he was dejected, he was depressed. And God said to Cain, why are you angry? And why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? In other words, he was giving him what's called musar. He was trying to teach him, like, your offering could have been accepted, but you brought you just the dregs. Why did you do that? If you would have brought from the best, it would have been accepted. And if you do not do well, sin crouches at the door, and to you will be his desire, yet you can rule over him. This is really the source of our existential reality in this world, of free will. God is saying that if you don't do well, you better watch out, because there is this negative force in the world that if you don't rise to the occasion, it will drag you down and it will go after you. In fact, the Talmud says that the Yetzer Hara tries to kill us every day. That's the beginning of what I quoted before. And if God would not help us, we would not be able to overcome. But God tells Cain, you can overcome this. I want you to overcome this. So actually, Reb Shlomo had a beautiful insight into this. First of all, he said that Hevel was a bit responsible also. Why did Hevel say to God, God, I'm so glad that you picked my offering, but couldn't you also accept my brother's? And Cain holds responsibility also. Instead of getting so angry and jealous, and in the end, for this and other reasons, he kills his brother, Cain could have said, I wish you would have picked mine, but I'm so happy that you picked my brother's. So Reb Shlomo was showing that there was something missing in a sense, on both sides. But the idea here is that this is, we'll call it the biblical source for this whole idea of a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Hara. Of course, this is connected, as I said, to the Eitz Hadat Tov Hara, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now, there's a incredible metaphor or parable in the Zohar. The Zohar tells a story of a king who had a very, very beloved son. But the king wanted to test his son. He wanted to see if he really was not just going to inherit him because he was the son of the king, if he really had it in him. And so he hired a prostitute. And he told the prostitute to try to get my son to be with you. And the prostitute tried, but the son wouldn't have anything to do with it. And the king was just so happy that his son had passed the test, and he could really trust that his son was worthy. But the Zohar makes an amazing comment and says, shouldn't we applaud and give credit to the prostitute? Because without the prostitute, the son would never have been able to prove himself to his father. So we should applaud the prostitute. Now, this is a startling metaphor, but what it's trying to teach us is that is sometimes as hard as it is to accept, the Yetzer Hara is doing God's will. The Yetzer Hara is doing God's bidding, just like the angel of death is doing God's bidding. And the Satan is doing God's bidding. And we could even say that the snake in the Garden of Eden was also doing God's bidding. The difference is God did not, in a sense, control Adam and Chava's response to the snake. The snake tries to get Chava to eat from the tree, but it didn't mean that she had to eat from the tree. So these teachings are very, very important, that we understand a bit about the Yetzer Hara, but we should never underestimate the Yetzer Hara. As God said to Cain, that if that sin is crouching at the door, and to you will be his desire. That is the task that God gave the Yetzer Hara, is to try to trip us up. Now, we might feel that this is unfair, but these are the rules of the game. This is how life was set up for us. And so therefore, in a sense, we have no choice but to win the game. And so I'm going to bless everyone that we have the strength and the wisdom and the courage to win the game. So since we mentioned about the Nachash, so this is a gematria that most people know, but the gematria of Nachash, the snake in the Garden of Eden, is 358, which is exactly the same numerical value of Mashiach. Now, this is brought all over the place, and everyone asks, whoa, what in the world does this teach us? That the Mashiach has the same gematria as the Nachash? So we can learn two things from this. The first thing is that Mashiach will be the one to defeat the Nachash. He will be able to fix what happened in the Garden of Eden. He will be able to overcome the Nachash. But on a deeper level, there is a connection between the Nachash and Mashiach. And this we can see in a teaching in the Zohar, that when the Torah talks about the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, all it mentions that they were in the middle of the garden. But the Zohar reveals that even though they appear to be two separate trees, their roots were intertwined. They were, in essence, coming from the same root. And this is true of the Nachash and the Mashiach. Meaning, and this goes back to the Nazir, that when we can get control of our passions, we can get control of our desires. There's nothing wrong with desire, and there's nothing wrong with passion. In fact, when it's channeled in the right way, is Mashiach energy. It is very, very positive. But when it's not channeled and it's not directed, so it ends up being the Nachash. And the Mashiach will be the one who will be able to convert this energy into the good. And this is really, really connected to the first Torah that we learned, where we said, Vahita ve'akadosh baruch hu liyot lo dira b'tachtonim. God himself had a passion, a desire to have for himself a dwelling place in the lower worlds. So God also, as it were, has passion and desire. But these are positive. And in the book of Mishlei, it talks about the tzaddik also having passion and desire. But here it's channeled towards the good, the desire to do good, the desire to be close to God, the passion to learn Torah, the passion that we could put into davening, the desire to make this a better world, to do acts of goodness. All of that is fueled by desire and passion. If not, we would be very lackadaisical. Nothing would touch us. Everything would just kind of, like we say, go in one ear and out the other. It would go in the heart and through the heart and not touch us. So here, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, is doing its purpose. And now I want to mention that there's a tremendous paradox that when the Nazir finishes his vow, then he has to bring a sin offering. And so everyone asks, what kind of sin did he do? Didn't he just do a really good thing? He got control, or he or she got control of their lives. Why would the Nazir bring a sin offering? And so it's explained, actually the simple understanding is because they refrained from the pleasures of this world. So we would ask, wait a minute, that's how they got in trouble in the first place, through the pleasures of this world. But here we come to a very, very fine line, an important fine line, that we're taught two things simultaneously. And they're both true, and we have to find the golden mean, is that God gave us this world to get pleasure from. Especially in Shabbos, we're supposed to get pleasure from food and drink. And we're supposed to get pleasure from marital intimacy. And we're supposed to get pleasure from being in nature, from developing our talents. We're supposed to enjoy this world. But on the other hand, we're not supposed to be overly invested in physicality. We're not supposed to be at the whims of our passions and desires and lose control. So every person has to find this very, very fine middle path between controlling passion, controlling our desire for physical pleasure, while at the same time being able to get pleasure from this world, and in fact, to raise it up and infuse it with spirituality. This is a great challenge, and it's something that we all deal with. And this is symbolized by that after the Nazir refrains, he has to bring a sin offering. And that way he went to one extreme of refraining, and now in a sense, he has to bring a sin offering to get back to the middle, to get back to a healthy middle way of how to deal with pleasure. Okay, now we move on to the third insight, which is called Secrets of the Priestly Blessing, Birchat Cohanim. One of the many things in this parsha is the very, very special priestly blessing, which is given as long as there is a Kohen in the congregation every single day, and twice on Shabbat and holidays. And in Chutz La'aretz, even though there are some Sephardi communities that also do it every day, but in virtually all Ashkenaz synagogues around the world outside of Israel, Birchat Cohanim is only done a few times a year on certain holidays, and not every Shabbos, and certainly not every day. But Birchat Cohanim goes back to the temple, and in this week's Parsha, this was a blessing that was done in the temple, and it's so special because we still do it today. It's a very, very direct connection we have to the temple. All of our prayers are a replacement for the offerings and the service of the Kohanim in the temple. All of our prayers. This is a subject that's too big to get into right now. But Birchat Cohanim is right from the temple. So I want to give over a very awesome understanding of Birchat Cohanim, but in order to do it, we have to kind of digress into some Kabbalistic teachings from the Arizal, and then we'll bring it back to Birchat Cohanim. So first of all, on the first day of creation, the word light appears 5 times. 5 times. And the different commentaries over the ages have found different correspondences. Why is light mentioned 5 times on the first day of creation? One of the connections is that this is an allusion, a hint to the 5 books of Moses, to the Chumash, to the Torah. And the Torah is called Torah Or, a Torah of light. In Aramaic, or Raita. It's a Torah of light. And so the 5 appearances of the word light hints to the 5 books of the Torah. The other correspondence are the 5 levels of soul. As we say, Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam, the candle of God, meaning the light of God is the soul of man. And these 5, very quickly, we've gone over this a number of times in different contexts, but the 5 levels of soul are Nefesh, which is the animal, behavioristic, instinctual part of the soul, most connected to the body. Ruach, spirit, which is connected to the emotions. Neshama is connected to the intellect. The Chaya, the living soul, is connected to mostly will and is the bridge between normative consciousness and supraconsciousness. And Yechida, the unique spark of godliness in each person. Again, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. So this is also hinted to in the 5 appearances of the word light in the first day of creation. Now, the Arizal says a very, very important thing. He says that a human being by nature, or a gift from God, has a nefesh and a ruach, has the lower level of soul, the animal soul, and has the emotional component. Now, these levels of soul for sure need to be rectified and directed and purified and improved, but they're part and parcel of our existential makeup. But the Ari says the next 3 levels of soul have to be earned. That neshama, chaya, and yechida not everyone really merits to them. Now, everyone will say has intellect, everyone has a brain, everyone operates in this world, but that doesn't mean that they're really connected to what's called neshama. Neshama is not just facts and figures, and is not just the type of intellect that allows us to operate in this world. The neshama is a much higher level of wisdom that filters down into normative logic and reason. And certainly the two higher levels of chai and yechida, many people virtually never access them. These have to be earned through a lot of hard spiritual work. Now, one of the secrets of what we call the neshama yetera on Shabbat, we're told that we get an extra level of soul on Shabbat. So this is also a gift, but that's taken away after Shabbat. We have to earn it to keep it permanently. So the Arizal said that we can learn from this that we're given, like our birthright are these two levels, but we have to raise ourselves to the next three levels. So then the Ari explains that this is connected to what we've discussed many times called Shvirat HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels. And the breaking of the vessels happened in the highest of the four Kabbalistic worlds, in Malchut of Atzilut, the world of emanation. And the result of that was the fall of the next three worlds. And each world becomes more physical, more material, more dense, more partitions between us and God's light. And these are the worlds of Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, the world of creation, the world of formation, and the world of action. So with Shvirat HaKelim, the world reality fell 3 steps. Now, this is connected to the 3 levels of soul that we need to earn or merit. Now, one more piece of this puzzle, and we're going to put it all together. In the teachings from the Arizal about reincarnation, so he explains a very, very complicated system of rectifications that have to occur for a person not to have to be reincarnated. Now, we're taught that reincarnation is not a punishment. In fact, the word in Hebrew for reincarnation, Gilgul, equals the word chesed. 72 equals loving kindness. It's God's chesed to us that allows us to fix whatever we need to fix, or improve whatever we need to improve, or finish what we didn't get a chance to finish. So the Ari explains a very, very complicated system where a person has to go through all 5 levels of soul and fix them and purify them and perfect them in order that there would be no reason to be reincarnated. So he explains in the secret of inter-inclusion. So if you have 5 levels of soul, well, each level of soul has all 5. So just like in Sfirat HaOmer, every day we do a combination of Sfirot. So this week is the week of Malchut. So the first day of this week was Chesed of Malchut, then Gevur of Malchut, then Tiferet of Malchut, and so forth. The same thing with the soul. There's a Nefesh of the Nefesh, there's a Ruach of the Nefesh, there's a Neshama of the Nefesh, a Chai of the Nefesh, and a Yechida of the Nefesh. And the same thing with the Ruach. So in other words, every level of soul actually has 25 levels, 5 times 5. 5 levels of 5, and each one has an inner inclusion of 5. So you get 25 levels of soul. But then the Ari says that we need to fix these in all 5 worlds. Now, usually we talk about 4 Kabbalistic worlds, but the Ari added a 5th world called Adam Kadmon. And so now we have 5 times 5 in each world, but there are 5 worlds. So 5 times 5 times 5 equals 125. Now we're going to take everything that I just gave over and we're going to apply it to Birchat Cohanim. This is all from the Arizal. This is just an amazing idea, and especially when we apply it to Birchat Cohanim. So here we have now, there's 125 levels. Just like now, metaphorically, we are climbing 49 levels to get to the 50th day, to Har Sinai. It's very, very similar. It's the same kind of paradigm. The idea of fixing all the different levels of the soul. And there are 125 of them, not just 49 in this paradigm, this model. So the Ari taught, if we remember, that we are given a nefesh and a ruach. Again, we need to fix them, but they are our birthright, the first 2 levels of soul. But we have to earn, we have to merit the other 3 levels of soul. So this is what the Ari said, and this is how it's connected to Birchat Cohanim. So if there are 125 levels of soul, but we're given 50 of them, we're given 2 levels, 25 and 25 is 50. If you take 50 from 125, you get 75. 75 is Gematria Kohen, the priest, the one who does Birchat Cohanim, the one who is the vessel, the channel through which God's light and energy is channeled to the people. So now we have to take this further. So the Kohen equals 75. So there's something about Birchat Cohanim that can help us at least experience these levels of Neshama, Chaya, and Yechida. Because Birchat Cohanim is made up of 3 verses. And for those who have Fruits of the Orchard, you can look at the bottom of page 375, and you can see it in Hebrew. And on the top of 376, it's in English. And anyone who wants to look in the book of Bamidbar, Numbers, it's chapter 6, verses 24 through 26. That is where Birchat Cohanim in this week's Parsha. So again, we are given, as it were, 50 levels of soul, and now we have to raise ourselves to acquire another 75. And that is the Kohen. And so this number 75 is connected numerically to Birchat Cohanim in the following way. Birchat Cohanim has 15 words. The first verse is 3 words, the second is 5, and the third is 7. 3, 5, and 7. It's a continuum, it's a structure, a paradigm. 3, 5, 7. That adds up to 15. There are 60 letters in Birchat Cohanim. The first verse has 15 letters. The second verse has 20 letters, and the third verse has 25. Again, we see a progression here. 3, 5, 7, 15, 20, 25. So it actually creates a triangle, And of course, the energy is coming from here, from Hashem, and coming down into the world through the hands of the Kohanim. Because the way Birchat Cohanim happens is the Kohen throws the talit over their head and halfway down their body so they can raise their hands, but the talit will be over their hands. We don't see their hands. And it's as if God is hidden, but through those hands, the light of God is going to be transferred to the people. So we have 15 words and 60 letters. That equals 75. So there's something about Birchat Cohanim that is going to help us experience. It doesn't mean we will absolutely acquire the 3 levels of Neshama, Chai, and Yechida, but the 3 verses of Birchat Cohanim, that we could have the intent that the first verse is a way to experience the light of God that will open up our neshamas. And the second verse will be the light of God helping us open up the chaya, the living soul. And the third verse will be God's light helping us access the Yechidah, the point of godliness within us. Now, there's another beautiful connection. And for those who have fruits of the orchard, this is actually written in the Parsha of Shmini in Vayikra. You can look back in Parshat Shmini, and there's also a section about the secrets of Birchat Cohanim. And there we discussed that if you look at a hand has 15 parts to it. Just like there are 15 words in Birchat Cohanim, and it works like this, that each finger has 3 parts. There's 2 joints, which creates 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. The thumb only has 2, 13, 14, and the palm of the hand is the 15th. So this corresponds to the 15 words of Birchat Cohanim. In the Mishnah describes the bones in the hand. And we're told that there are 30 bones in the hand. So if you take both hands together, that is 60 bones. So you have, again, the 15 parts of the hand, and then you have, with both hands, you have the 60 bones. And the symbolism here is that this blessing is coming through the hands of the Kohen. Now, what's significant is there are 10 fingers. And of course, these 10 fingers are going to correspond with the 10 sfirot, just like the 10 sfirot are the channels through which an infinite God bestows light and energy into a finite world. So Birchat Cohanim symbolizes the transference or the channeling of God's infinite light through the Kohen to the people. So this is the Ari's explanation of Birchat Cohanim, but there's a deeper idea here of the need to elevate 3 levels. And one of the places that we can see this is the 3 meals of Shabbat. We're told that Shabbat is, in a sense, divided into 3 sections. There's Friday night. Of course, we have Kabbalat Shabbat. And then we have the first meal. And then we have Shachrit and Musaf and the second meal. And then we have Mincha and the third meal. And we're told that every Shabbat is a paradigm of climbing these 3 levels. And that's why we get a neshama yetera. We get an extra level of soul that already is on top of the 2 that we have by birthright, as it were. And with these 3, then we can extend ourselves and we can experience the chaya and the yechida, these 2 higher supraconscious levels of soul. So this is a very, very deep understanding of the 3 periods or 3 parts of Shabbat and the 3 meals of Shabbat. All with this idea of elevating, and we're elevating the worlds. We're told that on Shabbat, all the worlds are elevated. Well, so the soul is also elevated. And again, this is one of the secrets of the neshama yetera, this extra level of soul. And I'll end, because this is connected to the holiday of Shavuot that is coming. Before we received the Torah, God told Moshe to tell the people really what the mission of the Jewish people is. And it's 4 words: Mamlechet Cohanim v'Goy Kadosh. That our mission in the world is to be a nation of Cohanim and a holy people. Now we know that we're not all Cohanim. So what does it mean, a nation of Cohanim? Well, just like the Kohen in Israel represents the one not only doing the service of God, but here through Birchat Cohanim is spreading the light of God, becomes the means to which the light of God gets to the people. So by calling us a Mamlechet Cohanim, it's telling us what Isaiah said, that our mission is to be Or Goyim, to be a light unto the nations. So by being a nation of Kohanim, it's as if our mission is to be giving Birchat Cohanim to the whole world, to be channeling God's energy and redemption and light and healing and rectification into the world. And so I bless everyone that we're only meeting after Shavuot, that everyone should have a Chag Sameach, should merit to receive the Torah once again at Sinai, and that we should rededicate ourselves to our mission in the world to be a Mamlechet Kohanim.